this is a conversation around poverty.
Yeah.
And so this packet was just put together by me to kind of guide some thinking and maybe a little bit today. And the auto hand to mouth, and I chose them because I needed to get a little more in-depth picture of what it's like to be poor, and I sort of felt like she began to kind of peel back some of the layers of my understanding here a little bit about maybe what it likes to be poor. So that's why she's in here. This is probably as much my need as anybody else's, and you're just stuck with it. I apologize. I hope she speaks to you though a little bit. And last week we looked at how she made money. She's part of what we call the intolerably poor, or the tolerably poor, kind of just living below the line, poverty, up and down, up and down. She works a lot of part-time jobs, and or at least she did before she started writing books. So
yeah,
what she's doing now here.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's she doing now?
So she kind of gives her insights last week about some of the difficulties with work, and this week she talks a little bit how she manages or doesn't, depending on your point of view, her money. And the reason I chose those is that if there is a hot button among scarcity-minded Christians, we all become deranged when we look at how other people improperly spend their money. And I don't know about you, but it clouds my ability to see the person quite often. And I get all caught up. My gut starts churning and I want to fix things. So I just kind of found, I mean, I'm not happy about what she does, but there is a kind of logic behind her, and there's a context to her spending habits, if you will. And I think she sums it up quite nicely when she says, if I can find it here real quick. Well, basically says the problem is we don't have enough money. Remember that? I mean, that was it. She says you can't stretch what you don't have. And she also makes the point that it's expensive being poor. Did you get that? Yeah. All right. In terms of the interest rates you pay and a whole number of kinds of things you do. So there it is. I remember I asked, I think it was last week, or maybe the week before, when we were kind of going through some biblical verses related to what the Bible says about poor, what Jesus said about the poor and our attitudes for the poor. And one of the things was to be careful not to be oppressing the poor and work for justice for the poor, right? And I asked the question, so this Linda Tirado, you think she's oppressed? And I didn't get much of an answer, okay? There was kind of, I don't know if she is impressed or not, you know, it's a pretty big word. And building on what you're this is kind of interesting. I wanted to ask the question just at the start here, before we get into some more particulars, is do you feel compassion for her situation because of her oppression? Do you? Or do as we go through this? Because that seems to be kind of a key in terms of our response as Christians. You see her as suffering? Are you moved to act because of what you see in her? So that kind of is what stands behind maybe our approach to this today. But let's just take a look at her and let's just have a prayer before we do. Try to do that. Gracious God, thank you for putting this on our hearts and minds. Pray that you'd lead us through this discussion this morning and help us to step away from whatever tends to cloud our vision of what you see in others, and ask for clarity and your help as we seek to understand and act in a way that honors you. In Christ's name. All right. So, what would you say is her approach to money management? How would you capitalize that?
I think she'd say you can't manage what you don't have.
You don't think she was a little bit frivolous? Remember toward the end of the chapter?
Yeah, I thought, yeah, because she said, this is why I spend my money, because I don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring or what the future's gonna bring, so if I want to buy a gaming system for my kids, I'm gonna do it. You know, they need to escape also, so.
She's kind of big on escape, wasn't she? Escape is the thing I value most, and it's the thing we'll sacrifice for. And why bother to save money if I could save $5 a week? That would net me a whopping $260 a year. And she says something is going to come up in the meantime that's just going to suck that up. I'll need a new battery for my car, you know.
So you go to the payday lender then to buy the battery or water pump or whatever it is.
And then they take part of your money.
Yeah, they do charge awful interest.
Since you brought that up, let's just kind of look at that.
What page is that?
I've been fairly critical of that myself in my superior sort of way.
My oldest son needed a part-time job and they were advertising here in Port Angeles.
The payday loan.
A payday loan place. So he went to work
Page 136.
like 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever. At noon, he was back at the house and I said, what are you doing? He said, you know what that place is? I said, no, tell me about it. Well, he was just appalled at what they did. And I got to thinking about it as I was reading the chapter. We don't have one of those businesses here anymore.
Interesting.
What
I
do
don't-
they do?
Hmm?
He's appalled at what?
Oh, the rates that they
Oh,
charge
okay, that's,
people.
okay, yeah.
And the kind of people, the poorly dressed,
Oh,
obviously hungry people that were coming into this place and getting money and taking it out, not really understanding what that charge was that they were being charged.
okay.
So he lasted, what, 4 hours working at this place?
You know, we don't see them a lot around here.
No.
But when we were driving through this south end of Texas and Oklahoma this summer, they're all over the place.
Mhm.
Especially in rural areas. Yeah. You might see them in more, I guess, impoverished areas around the state too. It wouldn't be surprised. Because she makes the point, they do serve a purpose that no one else does for poor people. Yeah. And she goes on to say, remember, even though the interest rate is exorbitant, you know, so I get a loan for $100 and it costs me $15, you know, it's just $15. And I can cover that in my next paycheck. So, and this gets back to that it takes a lot of money to be poor. I mean, being poor requires more money, I guess, than just the rest of it. So if you're going to look for a structural thing to address at some point related to poverty, and this is kind of a teaser for next week because we're going to talk about things to do, right? You know, she does say maybe somebody would wake up and come up with a nonprofit bank for poor people that charges reasonable rates, you know, and makes it accessible. I don't know, I want to
Can I say something to
say
that?
anything you want.
There was Muhammad Yunus in India created a bank called Grameen Bank, which is microfinance, and he tried to bring one into New York. And the intent was, can we bring microfinance to the US and eliminate payday loan practices, which are so exorbitant? That interest rate is 400%. If you can't pay it back, it just, you know, that's the debt you can't crawl out of, the hole that you can't crawl out of. So Muhammad Yunus has done this, but I think there's a lot of power behind, you know, they make a lot of money off of the poor. So there's not a lot of political will to do microfinance. Are you familiar with microfinance?
Well, it's a strategy being used in all kinds of developing countries through even Christian organizations and other nonprofits, where you get people together who are poor and they pool pool some money and it gets managed, and then they can give each other loans and they pay it back and they build some wealth through that. Happens all over the place, but
I'm not here.
well,
Or do you know, if I would love to find out that we have,
there was one organization, actually, I brought it up. It's called Upward. Oh, yeah. Up Toward, what is it? Anyway, it used to be the Family Independence Initiative, but it took on a new name. What the end result of what they do is kind of a microfinance. They actually insert actual cash into poor people's situations after identifying some skills and strengths that they have that they might be able to use that cash for. And they do this in migrant or immigrant communities quite often. And there's a sort of natural cohesion among the immigrant groups that come together, and they have aunts and uncles and uncles, cousins, you know, and small business. So I don't think it's called microfinance as a category, but the net result is kind of the same sort of process.
do you remember?
I will find it.
I would love to hear what that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's one thing. And then, you know, she links several things together in this chapter, does she not? So payday loans, and then that can affect the person's credit rating, you know, in other words, lower, which makes it more difficult than even rent a house or whatever else. Now, she makes some interesting comments about credit and using a credit rating to apply for a job, with the assumption that if you have a good credit rating, you're more responsible than if you don't have a good credit rating. Remember that? Any thoughts about that? Is there a link there? Is there a...
Well, first
she says it's unfair. She says, you know, she knows lots of people who have bad credit, who are responsible with bad credit ratings.
There's a lot of people in poverty that will not use bank, first of all. There's a lot of reasons for that. And this is interesting. One of the main ones that we ran into at Lutheran Community Services and talking with people, if there's any chance of their paycheck being garnished, if you have a checking account, you're a prime target. The second reason is child support. If you have a checking account or a savings account, you can't fool them and say, I have no income, because here you're sitting money in that checking account. People on the street do not use banks. And so getting credit is sort of a foreign language.
Oh, okay. It's not even within the realm of possibility, potentially.
Not really.
Yeah. But there's a difference maybe between people on the street and her situation, which she says she's gotten, she opened a bank account so she could get a direct deposit, but then she likes to keep her money close. Because apparently it can get garnished or something like that. So,
but banks encourage that. When we were in the orchard business, we banked with Bank of America, and the paychecks that we paid our people with were on Bank of America. And when they went to Bank of America would not even cash their checks. I mean, it's not just that they would charge them to cash it. They wouldn't cash the checks that we had written on there. I don't know.
That's why they go to Walmart to cash those checks. It's too.
Well, and I presume that wherever they do cash them, it's costing them a little bit to get the check cashed. That's all.
But they probably didn't have an account, right?
Oh, that's right. They did not have an account.
Yeah, well, that was in another study we did.
Yeah.
If you don't have an account, the bank's not gonna cash your check a lot of time.
Well, and remember in that homeless book that we read,
You might have been there.
remember he went all over the place
Oh,
trying to find somebody that would cash his check.
oh, what was the guy's name?
Breakfast at Sally's.
You read that one?
No, what's it called?
Breakfast at Sally's.
Sally's.
Okay.
And he's in,
He was from Bremerton.
Bremerton, yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna send that to myself.
Breakfast at Sally's,
It's really good.
The other thing,
and he was the
I
one.
guess she kind of touches on
Salvation Army.
talking
What's that?
about
Sally's is the Salvation Army.
credit
Okay.
bureaus.
Yeah.
In a sense, she's saying that the credit system, you know, is broken in a sense because it's not fair. And one of the things that happened to me is when I paid off my house, paid off the mortgage, my credit went from upper 700s into the 500s.
Because you weren't making
Immediately,
payments.
overnight.
Yeah.
Because I had nothing else.
Yeah.
That I
At one time.
Yeah.
I've noticed that.
So,
Yeah.
so it's really, I really don't, I haven't even bothered to do much about my credit rating. Because I don't use it.
Yeah. And you don't need it.
You
I don't need it. Yeah.
Well, so is it or isn't it fair? I mean, a lot of decisions, I mean, you can see why it's done, but it's not a solution for poor people apparently.
Right.
So where would that lead you to think in terms of what sort of a system would they need? She kind of teases you a little bit with a few things in here.
I guess my gut feeling after reading this section was hopelessness.
You think she felt that too?
I
think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And that was my feeling.
Mhm.
Like she's in a never ending cycle.
Yeah.
Gonna, anyway, she gets up, or it's a little higher, and then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cyclical, and it just,
Yeah.
she knows that it's gonna, things are good, and then it's gonna go, something's gonna happen, But I'm just amazed how many jobs and how many places she lived in, I mean, it just seems like
Yeah.
a plethora. It's like,
And you attribute that to,
what she's talking about, why she's left a lot of places, but just in this chapter, we've moved a lot of times for different reasons,
Yeah.
I remember when I was teaching, there were families, it was always in low income areas down in, near San Diego, but there were families that moved in the middle of the night and were like, how can you do this to your child? I mean, the kids didn't get to say goodbye. I mean, they're just, but they do it in the middle of the night, but then you have to pay all the upfront fees.
right,
So,
if you've left them behind, you don't get your security deposits back.
well, they said you don't get them back anyway, because they're gonna say, you put that crack in the wall or something.
Because you moved into a substandard place to begin with, and yeah, I mean, so you just kind of see this perpetual cycling of stuff, so it's no surprise with her comment at the end, it feels like I'm always climbing up the same hill. Always trying to make it to neutral, and I don't have the stamina of Sisyphus to keep me going. Who is Sisyphus? I looked that up, but I forgot.
I think it's
Mythology. That's right.
That was the mythology guy that was always pushing the rock up the hill.
Oh,
We turned out pushing the rock up the hill.
One of the other things I noticed she kind of says is throughout here that's capsulized maybe in this sentence. She says, for you to start to do better, something has to go right and stay that way for long enough for you to get on your feet. And so this is sort of a litany of all the things that can possibly go wrong. Why I can't save, why I can't move into a decent apartment, why I can't get credit, And this whole idea that they live with absolutely no margin. I think she begins the chapter saying something like, where was that? It's amazing that the things which are absolute crises for me are simple annoyances for people with money.
Mhm.
All right, yeah. Now that evokes in me the beginnings of a little sense of compassion. I mean, just that living so close to the scene, or what she called living at neutral, where nothing's dragging you down, but nothing's pulling you up either. You know, you're just sort of, I mean, hoping. And you know, if you live in that state, what happens? You know, you're just wondering when the next shoe's going to fall and drop, right? Yeah. So you kind of set up oh, here it comes. Oh, down we go. Ooh, I got a little break. How long is that going to last?
Perfect environment for anxiety and depression.
Okay, now you're talking about the spiraling of 1,000 other kinds of things, are you not?
That's right.
Yeah.
I did like what she said though about some of them helping each other, you know, like go to their friend that happens to be doing a little bit better at this time and get loans from them. They support each other, so.
And that's breakfast at Sally's.
Yeah.
Really talked about that. They went to each other.
Because there's not a structure
Mhm.
that helps or that is accessible, useful, supportive. I don't know what kind of adjective you want to use there. And again, that's the arena when you think about diving into this, that somehow we have to get a little more creative about. And so I just again kind of throw that back out to you.
You know, where's the church in this? I think about
Oh, you read that? Good for
about the
you.
Mormons.
Yeah.
You know, their lights, twinkling lights in the sky are, you know, we help our members. I bet they don't have people that are lacking food. If you're a member of the Mormon church, if you're willing to share that you're hungry.
Yeah, at times that's true. But I think there are times for Mormons who aren't faithful Mormons, who probably don't get that.
Right.
Well, they're not real Mormons.
They're not. Yeah.
That's interesting, though, is it not?
But
That there is a network
There is a.
Yeah.
that probably impacts employment, I would imagine, may impact food on the table. There's kind of a sense of connection. Yeah,
They hire their own.
that's what we've heard.
My brother was sucked up in that. He got fired because he wasn't Mormon. Even though he brought in tons of business and he won awards, but I mean, that's just one instance, but I mean, that kind of thing can happen.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's across the board.
And so what's the problem with that system? It's a little bit closed, right?
Mhm.
Is it possible to create a permeable, open, functioning system? You know?
Well, the other
Just never land.
kind of the other danger is the religious exclusive aspect of it, because that's not really what our faith is about. You know, we're supposed to be more inclusive. And so, you know, when you start to try to accomplish that sort of thing, you have to be careful of that. How you're going to employ it and how you're going to make it applicable to whoever. You know, it's got to be open to the whole community, not just those that you pick and choose.
Are there any models that any of you are aware of where community of denominational churches or even non-denominational somehow find a way to knit themselves together in a supportive network? Have you?
Well, Manna.
I was gonna say, yeah, we've got Manna, we've got the churches that feed, you know, St. Andrews up there feeds on.
Those are individual kind of things,
No.
initiatives. They're nothing that's sort of coordinated.
Oh, I see.
Oh, they use other churches' personnel to support those ministries.
What about the Methodist church? They used to have the dinners.
Right.
I heard that our church used to do it when I was at the Baptist church. We used to go
We
out
used
for
to
the
go
day.
there.
I'm wondering if people on property go to church. I'm thinking back of all the churches I've ever attended. I don't
It's a pretty middle class thing.
I don't know if people that are really in poverty attend a church that could be of help.
Now, there's an interesting thought.
You know,
You know,
the
Do we
churches,
have any here?
the
I
churches
would
that
wager
tend,
to say yes.
the churches that tend to draw lower income are Pentecostal, Assembly of God.
Yeah.
Those kinds of churches draw, at least from my experience, have
That's
drawn.
true in South America, I would say. Yeah, is that true here too?
I think so.
Why?
My wife said in Joe, independent church is much more blue collar than ours. And not necessarily poor, but, you know, more blue collar, and probably there are some poor people there too.
You know, but in our scripture lesson this morning, I heard something I hadn't heard before. Maybe it was the translation you're reading before. But the landowner went to town and saw people who were idle. People who needed to work. So where'd the initiative come from? They saw them idle. We don't maybe have the vision because we're in such a tight little bubble, you know, to see whatever the idol might mean out there, kind of extended meaning. And I mean, that kind of smacked me. Dang it.
Scripture.
I know.
It's so terrible how it does that.
Yeah.
You've heard it how many times and it.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of quit listening for a minute, and I was thinking, what? Where did that come from? All right. Other thoughts here? I don't know if we hit all our questions or not.
But the question still is, what kind of church do? That's a valid, important question.
And I vacillate between that question, what can the church group do, and what can I do? You know, it's kind of almost feels mutually exclusive or something. You know, you kind of feel like, well, as a group, we never did anything done. We just didn't talk, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, I'm going to do something. And then, you know, you get all this bunch of 1,000 people doing something, and it's a little bit herky-jerky. It's better than nothing, I guess. But yeah.
Well, you work down at Taffy, or do you still work down there?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, well, you're reaching homeless people or people that want to work, or
It doesn't have that much to do with the people.
I just plant things. I mean, I do. That's really, let's be honest there.
okay, but
I'm not one of the inside group that sits and has dinner with those kids. I've been thinking about were they even receiving all the things they're like me or not. I guess that might be kind of interesting. No,
well, okay, but I mean that's
I'm a
available.
grower, if you will.
You know what I find really interesting, and I know you know because you're on next door a lot, but people, well, two things. One, people are moving into the area and they have nothing. I'm like, well, where are they living? You know, because it's so hard to get housing. That's number one. But if they say, I need king size, well, not king size, I need a queen size bed or something. I mean, 6 or 7 people answer, I've got this, I've got that. What else do you need? I mean, it looks like amazing. One lady needed diapers, and this lady says, well, I'll go buy them for you. I mean, they were telling her you can also go.
Where's this or how's
Next door is an app.
Oh,
It's a, you know.
I thought you were referring to Jim.
No,
No, because I'm on there a lot, you know.
it's really nice to see these people are helping other people, you know, that they don't even know, and I'll meet you at so-and-so place, or.
So there's a platform, like a
Yeah.
nexus, if you will, that can kind of connect, that a lot of people can access. And as we've noted, most poor people have smartphones, you know.
Yeah, so they know how to work that part of the system. I don't know if they're working or what they're doing, and some of them will be on there, I need a job doing this and that. Now, would you hire them? I don't know. I mean, I'd be hesitant because I'm a single person, but you know what I mean? So, because you don't know who they are and you don't.
It was interesting to me that half of the kids or so in public schools are on free lunches, but about 80% of them have iPhones. This was in.
Not just smartphones, but iPhones.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they really look down on Androids. Only old fogies like us have Androids. The kids have to have their iPhones.
And some of that is parents wanting to have connection with their kids. But it almost in every case, it goes well beyond.
If they're finding the money.
Heidi, ask her Heidi. Up together. I just got it.
Oh, up together, okay.
All right, I just had to break in. I got to make a point because while it's in my brain, it would have just floated off really, really fast.
Okay. What churches can do.
Yeah.
So the church, a church in Tacoma, where my younger son goes, he and his family. I think they have about 3 homes for low income families. So there's one thing that a church can do.
We have that to rent.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so we have 2 renters.
One is really low income, and I'm not sure if the other one qualifies or not.
Yeah.
I think what's so hard about all this is it's really getting to know people and investing in their lives.
Yeah.
And it takes not just a drop in and drop something on them, but it takes going for the long haul. And I think that overwhelms us. And, you know, it's like I said in my sermon this morning, my parents taught us not to get into debt. But that's not what everybody gets. Some, you know, if you grow up in a family where that's how they survive, you know, then you get into that cycle and it's really hard to get out of it. And it takes a long obedience and a slow walk in the same direction. Yeah, thank you, Eugene Peterson. But I think, yeah, that's the hard thing is to get to know people. And I don't know if you've heard of the book When Helping Hurts.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Toxic charity.
Yeah, it's you know, we tend to want to just throw money at things,
Right.
where that actually can do more harm than good.
Right.
And so it really is walking alongside people and, you know, sitting down and having lunch with them and getting to know them, hearing their story, and it's not a quick fix.
So that's what we're afraid of.
Yeah.
Which that's a lot of what we do on Nextdoor. We get to know each other as neighbors.
Well, I don't, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a good portion of us that do that. And I don't just mean the people on your block. I mean, I know people all over town now that I didn't know before because of this app. And it's the connections that are through commonality. In other words, the people that needed help with pruning their trees, I know them because that's something I do. That's something I enjoy doing. And, you know, so I would go out and like there's one family that was out on the west end of town. They had these birch trees growing up into the wires next to their house. And they were getting nervous. I said, oh yeah, I can get them out there. And so I did. Spent a couple weeks doing it, you know. But
We've got some yard work.
But so often it's not just handing somebody money. More often than not, it's providing for a need, which when we start looking at things as being solved with dollars and cents, we've just closed our heart to
The individual.
The individual.
Okay, so this is just a setup for next week, but this is something we'll have to wrestle with, and I hope I can bring this a little bit more to life next week too. But so Stan's question, what can the church do? That sort of speaks to more of a structural approach. How can we address something that is wrong that in the system out there, or augment it somehow so that, you know, more people can have access to whatever they need? I mean, what you're talking about then is what can the individual do, and how can we see poverty, and how can we see its impact on a person? And there's some tension there, really. And as I I don't know if you remember the very first session when I was talking about this Up Together organization. It was founded on the fact that the belief that instead of throwing money, none of that works, that you need to empower people to, you need to see them, you need to help understand them, and then you need to, you're going to use cash, put it in a place that helps them meet their kind of goals and, you know, have them moving on. But as that organization developed over a period of about 10 years, this last year, they put into their kind of mission statement, and not only that, and we need to deal with the structures that hold people down. So, you know, there is a kind of both and sort of thing going on here if you're going to address, but you know, most of us won't have the luxury to just maybe do the whole thing, you know, maybe we'll be a good neighbor, or maybe we'll address, you know, some sort of structural issue, and I think that's okay. And as we kind of look at possible solutions, I'm going to try to divide those between structural things and individual things. And I think I might even give you a little decision matrix to help you understand for yourself what's the most important of these things to work on. We'll see where we come out. It might be kind of fun. I remember how to do that. It's been a long time since I put one of those decision makers together, but it won't take too long. Anyway, it's just a nice exercise to go through to help you when you got a whole bunch of things you might do. How do I figure out what's the most important kind of thing to do? So anyway, pray with me. Now that I've said it, I guess I'll have to support, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Methodist Church, were they gonna get a little house on their property? Did they do that?
They're still planning it.
So how are they helping the individual or?
I have no idea. My assumption would be that they're using some of the established agencies in town to do the screening and
And then.
yeah, eligibility.
So those places don't have like a bathroom, and then they'd have to use the church.
I don't know that.
Well, I know, okay.
The unit that's not, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, so then they have to put a porta potty or something, but they still need to take showers, so they would probably use. I'm just wondering how all that's working.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to find out, and I know something a couple years ago, they wanted to, or they were asking to put something. Not directly on our property, but they were talking in general about churches having trailer or something on their properties.
Well, I remember Pam talking about the problems that Taffy ran into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had the buildings, but then they ran into all kinds of glitches.
Yeah, city codes or something on the electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it down.
And people who've been impoverished don't always keep up the facilities.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with Jean Kim. She worked in the Northwest Coast Presbytery and she worked a lot with homeless people and started, my husband's pastor at Maplewood Press. And she did a tiny village on another property and was working with community college as well, students trying to get them through school and doing anyway, it was on the property. It didn't have, I don't think, great supervision. And then it kind of, you know, it can become it can be a place of crime. It can be a place of a lot of garbage. And so it's complicated. But I love that you're doing OPOP here, right? I saw that. So that whole idea of one church coming around, you know, and providing all those resources. I think if all churches kind of did that you know, we'll take on this one family and walk with them, you know, with the agencies who screen who's going to be the best, you know, I think that's kind of a great model. When you try to take on the whole thing, it's overwhelming. So, so I don't know. We haven't figured it out either. So I'm learning as well.
So another kind of little personal check here. How do you feel about other people making money at the expense of the working people? I mean, you know, as it relates to interest rates, as it relates to maybe what it takes to get into a rental, where do you draw a line between what's reasonable and what isn't reasonable? Because that's something that kind of keeps coming up and it's just never addressed. You're just stuck with whatever system you have. You know, we saw the eviction process in Richmond, Virginia, stricter than some other places, obviously. But, you know, again, that that's an entry point into attacking a problem, I guess I would say. But it kind of starts with, does that tug at you? Does that say, wait a minute, this isn't right? That's usually how things start to change. And
The hard thing with the rental kind of, because you've got this property and Bill has a duplex, so he's had some people that didn't take, even though he had them pay the money, didn't really take care of it, but it's your property and it's like, you know, it costs a lot of money to maintain,
Yeah,
so it's
I know.
like, you kind of don't want to just let anybody in there, you know? And how are you gonna know? I don't know.
You probably don't. We have 2 low-income rentals on our orchard property, and some renters will take what they get and make it better, and others will take what they get and trash it.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's tough
It's
to.
really hard.
so you can't go into it with a lot of assumptions. You have to go into it with a sense of either it's right or it isn't, I guess, and live with the consequences. Is that what you're saying? You know, if you did, for instance, lower what it costs to get into an apartment, or we don't like that because we're kind of, it's the word, oh gosh. Anyway, I do something for you, we expect you to do something for me. What do they call that?
Quid pro.
Quid pro quo. Yes.
Yeah.
And it sort of bothers our sense of equity and
Fairness.
Fairness.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in order to help with this in any meaningful way, you have to kind of get over ourselves somehow, which might be kind of difficult. I don't know. And it really, though, makes kind of the Jesus approach seem possible, where it's moved to compassion and active, you know, and puts it back on an individual level. That I can handle a lot better than the structural stuff. That I know. But yet we know that we live in a framework that is just difficult, doesn't work for everyone in a country that where it's supposed to work for everyone. You know? That just sets off all kinds of angst. Does it? I mean, it was for me. I don't know what that's.
Well, that's, as a dependency counselor, one of the things we used to run in with all the time with our patients is they want to fix everything all at once. And you'll never get it done if you're going to go at it that way. You got to decide, you know, what's most important, you know, set out your priorities and attack one thing at a time. And you know, as you accomplish things, then move on, and it prepares you to accomplish more things.
The kind of one foot in front of the other. I don't know about you, but I tend to stir up a lot of angst over a period of time, and then when I finally break loose and want to do something, I want it all done now.
That's too typical human.
Oh, geez. Okay. Hey, I think, Pastor Heidi, we want to give you a little chance to do something here. So I want to, how do we get out of this?
So where do you live?
Exit full speed.
In Shoreline.
And I want to go to.
Our son's your neighbor.
So I'm kind of stuck with this notion that in order to act, we have to somehow see something that evokes maybe compassion in us. That's maybe a starting point, right? And I think I've indicated that I'm not sure if I feel compassion for Ms. Tirado or not, you know. Like, can't you do something here on her own? Yeah. Anyway, I ran into this little Bible project. I love Bible project because they kind of talk about a big idea in a short, succinct kind of way. Anyway, one of the attributes of God, perhaps even the first attribute we learn about God, is compassion. So I don't know if this will speak to you at all, but you might have a thought after we watch this, and then maybe we'll just close here. All right. It's completely out of reach now.
I think that was exactly what I was trying to say in the sermon today. I mean, you know, it is about the compassion. And I do find that because we're so hard on ourselves, it's hard for us to be compassionate with others. So that is, I think, the place we start is with our compassion for our own brokenness and not setting ourselves up to be the great saviors of the people that we come into contact with. Because oftentimes what people need is someone to hear their story deeply, to not try to fix it, and to be there with them. And, you know, as a chaplain, I can't fix people's stories out there, but I can sit with them in their pain and acknowledge that God's love is there with us. And I don't even have to say that necessarily. A lot of times it's just being in that compassionate place that moves the needle for people, because the Holy Spirit's at work. But it starts with being willing to be vulnerable and listen to people's pain and sit with those super uncomfortable feelings, because we want to fix. That is our So anyway, what a wonderful lesson to follow up. This is like sermon 2.0 is basically. So thank you for sharing, and thanks for the resources too.
Any other last shots here?
I was just wondering, we had somebody from Concrete for the Presbyterian Church there last week, speaking, or 2 weeks ago. Last week. Anyway, but his whole church sounds like it's pretty low income, but are they all in homes, do you think? I mean, he didn't sound like they were trying to facilitate that, but.
That's probably as individual as there are individuals.
Yeah, so. I mean, we're talking about a church supporting him, but.
Well, I think throughout this, we've had glimpses of responses. You know, think about the documentary we saw on the second session. You know, Riley's were here. Linda Torado kind of throws some teasers in, some possibilities, you know, what if there was better access to X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, I just keep all that sort of rattling, because we'll try to gather some of this stuff up next week and just look at it. What's our response? Maybe you get a new idea, a new vision. Honestly, I don't know the best way to deal with it, but when I was approached about leading this discussion, I said, well, what's the goal? And she says, well, it'd be nice to know what to do. You know, we always want to do something. But if we can just find a place to scratch the itch, you know, and get after it. But I think it is motivated not by a sense of duty or even altruism. That as a Christian, it needs to go a little bit deeper. And I guess that's the point of maybe sharing this little thought here and your sermon this morning. Okay? So
you're asking all the right questions. So, and I really believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to provide the answers. So keep asking the questions. Most of us don't want to ask the questions, so
you might have to do something.
Yes, it's easier not to, but good stuff. There's a Everett Gospel Mission is coming to our church November 4th, I think it is, to teach a class on poverty. And so they have
know how they approach it.
Yeah, well, they do some really good things. So I'm looking forward to it. I signed up for the class because I want to hear, because I'm like you, I don't, you know, I think you want to walk carefully and thoughtfully and prayerfully.
Everett Gospel Mission?
Yeah. I think it was advertised in the Presbytery newsletter. So
they gonna Zoom it or anything?
I don't know. It's at Maplewood. It's at my husband's church. So, but it was open to anybody in the Presbytery who wanted to come. But it was a limited number of people. So I don't know if they're going to Zoom it. That's a good question. You can reach out to the Presbytery and ask them about it.
Well, you might ask them if it's all right with them to record it.
Yeah.
So, and that way, we could request a recording of what they presented.
Yeah, yeah.
And we go from there.
It says Everett Gospel Mission is the only shelter for men experiencing homelessness in Snohomish County. We welcome an average of 145 men each night, each person in our residential. Anyway.
Hey, I'm done.
I'm done.
So
Thank you.
you are dismissed.